See if you can guess what I am now. I'm a zit. Get it?
Director John Landis, today on Pop Goes the Culture. Hi, I'm David Levin, and welcome to another arresting episode of Pop Goes the Culture TV. I had so much fun with my guest today. He's almost like a mischievous kid with a great sense of humor and a lot of stories. John Landis directed some of the landmark comedies of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, including Animal House, An American Werewolf in London, The Three Amigos, Trading Spaces. He worked with Michael Jackson to create the groundbreaking music video, short film, Thriller. In this first of five interviews, John Landis talks about how he got started working on Kentucky Fried Movie with the guys who later did Airplane, and how he got involved with Animal House.
Do you ever see do you know Harry Shearer, who Harry is? Yeah. Harry and I used to watch this show religiously, no pun intended, but the Chabad has a telethon. Have you ever seen it? We call it the Shonda for the Goyim broadcast. It's like profoundly embarrassing. It's just like, oh my God, you can't believe, but you know, they're all nuts. They have a very good band though, a really good klezmer rock and roll band. And you know, it's all men dancing and berserk and stuff. About 12 years ago, suddenly we notice in the dancing berserk guys is John Voight, wearing a yarmulke natalis, and yidle dancing, and we're going, the fuck is that? Then the next year is John Voight and Bob Dylan. Hey, you like the dancing and being nuts with the rabbi, it's like, what the fuck? And now you see it once a year, the Chabad telethon. It comes from LA, but it's national. And they raise millions of dollars from wacko Jews, I guess. But it turns out, because it was a mystery, like what? Then huge, like Chicano gangbang guys with shaved heads and scary tattoos, palace and yarmulkes dancing, and then big black guys, and I'm going, what the fuck? And then like scary, clearly not Jewish motorcycle biker guys. What is going on? Turns out that Chabad has one of the most successful substance abuse programs in the country.
And all these people
went through it. And I learned all about it. And the most interesting thing I learned was that their success rate was something like 15% of the people who go through get completely clean. And I said, that's terrible. It turns out to be like the best in the country. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
15%.
That's amazing. It's a little depressing, but it would be
I think so. But you get, they get federal and state money, so it's open to everyone. So the Chabad, the one here, there's several of them. The one is down on Olympic. I've gone there several times. I'm fascinated by it because it's the wackiest group of substance abusers, because there's like literally yeshiva guys, you know, standing next to huge bikers with giant crosses next to Black and Latino and Chinese. It's wild because they're lawyers and agents and movie stars and, you know, criminals. And
your next documentary.
I asked about that too. Did you see Slasher?
I have not seen Slash.
You bastard!
Sorry.
Do you have a card?
I do have a card.
Yeah, I'll send you Slasher. That's my first feature-length documentary I made.
Really?
Yeah, I'm really proud of it. A couple years ago, I made it for Independent Film Channel.
Oh, man. Well, let's talk about, speaking of drug abusers, let's talk about Animal House.
There's very little, there's no drug abuse on Animal House.
No, but you know.
Okay, what about it?
No, actually, you know, the first movie of yours that I saw before I even knew who you were was Kentucky Fried Movie. Mm-hmm. And I think I was in high school, which, I don't know how you feel about that, but I was in high school when Kentucky Fried Movie came out. Loved it.
Well, that's the perfect age.
Exactly, and just watch it over and over. And when it came out on video, got it on video.
If you know, there's a DVD of Kentucky Fried Movie now that Anchor Bay put out, and about 3 or 4 years ago, Bob Weiss, Jerry Zucker, David Zucker, Jim Abrams, and I sat on this couch. It was like Miami. We all sat on this couch and watched the movie. We hadn't seen it like 10 or 12 years, and we just do a commentary during it. The commentary is so much funnier than the movie. The commentary is genuinely funny.
Talk about some of the people you worked with on that movie, because it was pretty...
Kentucky Fried?
Yeah.
Well, what do you mean? You mean David and Jerry and Jim? Okay. The Kentucky Fried Theater was started in Madison, Wisconsin, and I think, you can double check with those guys, but I think it's because they came up with it at a Kentucky Fried Chicken place. But they were in college in Madison, two brothers, David and Jerry Zucker, and their friend Jim Abrams. And they created this, college skit thing. And they started doing skits and they were very early with home videos, video in the skits and stuff. And they were very successful in Madison, Wisconsin. Their uncle, the Zucker's uncle, owned a building on Pico near Fox in West LA. And they got a good deal, free, and got this building, and they came out to LA, and they made a little theater in it, and they lived upstairs, and they started a weekend cabaret type show in LA, and they were very successful. I don't know any of this, okay? I'm going along on my own. And I had made my first feature film called Schlock, which was in 1971. And I was 21. I made this movie. I'd been in. It's much too boring to go into here. Anyway, it finally got a distributor and came out in '73. And I went on The Tonight Show to promote it. In fact, it's the only movie Johnny Carson ever gave a quote to. He let us say, "Really wild, really funny, Johnny Carson." And that meant a lot then, too. So anyway, when I was on The Tonight Show, David Zucker saw me on The Tonight Show. All right, go back a little bit. There's a guy named Bob Weiss, Robert K. Weiss. Bob Weiss, at that time, ran a company called Video Systems, and they made industrials and training films. And I worked as a stuntman for Bob Weiss on, traffic safety, trucking safety, and we did this recognition of wounds for LAPD. And I worked for Bob Weiss a couple times. And Bob used to play basketball with the Zucker, Abrams guys. So David sees me on The Tonight Show and comes to basketball that day and says, I saw this kid on TV and he made a movie and we should make a movie too, gosh darn it, And Bob says, I know that guy. He works for me, So they got me together. We had lunch at Hamburger Hamlet. And I said, well, do you have a script? And they literally were like this. I said, a screenplay, what do you want to do? And they go, what do you mean? I said, you need a script. And I gave them a script that I had written when I was 19 called An American Werewolf in London. And I say, well, forget the content, just copy the form. And I didn't hear from them for a year. And then I did, and they had this script, Kentucky Fried Airplane. And there was some very funny stuff in it. And I said, well, this is another movie, isn't it? Isn't this a movie called 0 Hour? I've seen it on TV. They go, yeah. And I go, well, there's a fine line between parody and plagiarism, So we could better come up with more jokes. So I worked on it for a while with them. And after a while, it was very clear that I felt, you can't do this unless you have legal clearance to do this. I really thought it was too close. Anyway, we had this long thing, and someone suggested, now, in that DVD commentary, I learned that Bob and Jerry and Jim say it was me. I thought it was Bob, but someone suggested, why don't we just shoot the show, the skits, which would have been a good 20-minute film. So I said, okay, great, that's great, let's figure it out. So then we added stuff, and now we had this, screenplay full of wacky stuff, and it was like, all right, now how do we pay for it? There's no way anyone's going to give us money for this. And believe it or not, people have a misconception about independent films. In the early 70s, the 60s was a great time for independent cinema, but the 70s also, you could go look in the phone book, and there was Crown International, American International Pictures, Jack H. Harris. I mean, I'm trying to think, but so many little schlocky distributors, millions of them, many more than there are now. Mostly dealing in exploitation, but nonetheless, there were a lot more than there are now. There were the mob one, Bryanston in Texas, that did released, the Night of the Living Dead. And anyway, so we made the movie. No, we didn't. I'm sorry. So what we did was, we had a good idea, which was we'll shoot 10 minutes of the movie and use it as a teaser to get the money for the movie, and then we'll take that 10 minutes and put it in the movie. So Bob and I put up our talent. And Jerry, David, and Jim put up $30,000, and we shot one day. We shot Cleopatra Schwartz, the black exploitation trailer. the Kennedy assassination game scot-free, the sex in front of the television set, and Zinc Oxide, the educational film. We shot those all in one very crowded day or 2 days, I don't know. And I was pretty pleased with them. And the boys, you know, then we took them around to all the major studios who politely said, "Get the fuck out of here," you know. So the boys were like, "You screwed us, John. You did a bad job. Somehow it's your fault." And I said, "You know, this stuff's funny, guys. Let's put it in front of an audience." Mm-hmm. So the New Art Theater on Santa Monica Boulevard was this, still there, art house theater, which used to show movies at midnight and double features every day. And it was great theater. I mean, you'd see Bizarro, you'd see like a reissue of Mel Brooks, The Producers, and Fellini's 8½, you know, just like insane double bills. And it was owned by a guy named Kim Jorgensen, Danish guy. And I said, "Look, Schlock has played that theater at midnight screenings. Let's call him and see if he'll show it." And so I said, "Kim, would you please show this 10 minutes free one night with something?" I think it was Where's Papa? I don't know what the movie was. So it was a crowded theater, and he played it, and it was great. It was a big success. And Kim, the manager of the theater, said, "What is this?" And we told him. He said, "How much you need?" We said, $500,000. He said, "If I get it for you, can I be the executive producer?" And we said, "Absolutely." He literally flew to San Francisco with the reel, came back the next day with the money. And the great irony there is Kim Jorgensen has 2 credits. He's the executive producer of Kentucky Fried Movie, and Kentucky Fried was very, very profitable. With the money Tim made, he bought the rights to a book by, what's her name? I'm going to mispronounce her name, so I won't say it, but he bought the rights to Out of Africa, and then was able to get that made years later by Sidney Pollack and Bob Redford and Meryl Streep. So you have this, Kim Jorgensen has 2 credits. He's the executive producer of Kentucky Fried Movie and Out of Africa. So meanwhile, the boys, from Jerry, David, and Jim, from the success of Kentucky Fried, went to Paramount and said, "Can we buy Zero Hour?" And they said, "Well, I don't think so, but talk to Howard Koch. He owns it." And Howard Koch said, "Hey, I'll produce Airplane, then you won't be in any trouble." And they made Airplane, which was a gigantic success. But from Kentucky Fried, I got Animal House.
Let's talk about Animal House, because that was the big one, right?
It was a big success. Yeah. It was a real big hit.
What were you expecting? I mean, was it?
I certainly wasn't. No one. It's different. It's very hard to understand for younger people now in terms of how movies work, because now motion picture business is really it's like the motion picture business has become the minor business. It's a source for merchandising and for theme park rides and for television series and for DVD sales, and you know it's a very different thing than it was. And you open a movie now in thousands of theaters and hope to Christ it makes some money, because if it doesn't the first couple of days, you're out of there. Whereas in the old days, you used to have, you know, the first run theaters in a city, and then it would go to the suburbs and play out to the drive-ins, and a film could platform. That's true on television. A series like Friends now would last maybe 3 weeks. Friends did poorly its first, not Friends, Seinfeld. Thank you. Seinfeld is the example. Seinfeld did very poorly its first 2 years. Well, now after 3 weeks they pull you. But Seinfeld was able to build and finally became this phenomenon. That's what happened with Animal House. They opened it at these theaters and it platformed, and then it became this phenomenon. It really was something. It was amazing. You don't expect that.
How did you get involved with it? How did that? Did it come from you? Did it come from
No. I was late to it. I'm in L.A., surfing and being set on fire and throwing out of buildings. I was working as a stunt guy then. And in New York, Matty Simmons was the publisher of the National Lampoon magazine, which used to be a good magazine. I mean, there were 5 or 6 years though there where it was quite cutting edge, when it was Doug Kenny, what's his name? Doug Kenny, Henry Beard, P.J. O'Rourke, Tony Hendra. There were some very talented guys. So National Lampoon was from the Harvard Lampoon, And like the Harvard Lampoon at the time, it was very waspish. It was very nasty. It had a very hard edge. It was very funny.
Buy this magazine or we'll shoot this.
Exactly. It was a very, very cutting-edge humor magazine. And the genius, I think, was Doug Kenney, who came directly from Harvard. Doug was a really extraordinary guy. He came from Chagrin Falls, Ohio. And I really got an insight into Doug when I learned that his father was the tennis pro at the golf club. It taught me everything I had to know, because he was like a Ralph Lauren ad. You know, he was like everything Ralphie Lipschitz wants to be. So when Doug got wealthy from the magazine and was tired of it, and he said to Maddie, he said, I really want to make movies maybe. And to keep Doug at the magazine, Maddie said, we're making a movie. We're making a movie. And Doug said, really? He said, yeah, we're making a movie. Why don't you write it? Doug went, okay. Well, Doug was behind the brilliant, I don't know if you remember, but there was a publication on the National Lampoon High School Yearbook, which was a great piece of work. And so they thought, well, they'd do that. And originally, he got together with Harold Ramis, who was from Second City, and they thought they'd do this film called something, Laser Orgy Girls. And it was, you know, semi-pornographic and outrageous. And Maddie took one look at the treatment and he said, oh my God, these are high school kids with the drugs and the sex and put it in college. You know, so this is all before I'm there. I know, you know, I'm out in LA surfing. So Doug and Harold wrote, I remember they wrote this one thing, Charles Manson in High School, which was they had a wonderful opening, which was the camera moving in on San Quentin and then up through the bars and through the walls and deeper in the bowels of this dungeon until you go through this secure cage, you know, and there's this Charles Manson in a straitjacket, the swastika carved in his forehead, and he looks right in the camera and he says, is it hot in here or am I crazy? Which I thought was a great beginning. Anyway, but this is long before I'm there. So then what happened was Chris Miller, who was a writer for the Lampoon. Now, all three of these guys were in college in 1962 in fraternities. Chris Miller at Dartmouth. It's actually based on Chris's fraternity at Dartmouth. And Chris had written these stories, Tales from the Adelphian Lodge, in the Lampoon, which were pretty raunchy stories about his frat life. And Doug or Harold, I don't know who, said, we should do, you know, with Chris, do this. And so that's how the first script of National Lampoon's Animal House was written. Now, there's a guy named Ivan Reitman, who is now the incredibly successful director, producer, Ivan Reitman of Ghostbusters fame, and his son has just made a big hit movie now, that Thank You for Not Smoking. Ivan from Toronto, actually I'll tell you, this is just a strange story, it has nothing to do with anything, but I just shot this show in Vancouver, and I've now shot several things in Canada. But the first, when I was a mailboy at 20th Century Fox, they were making the movie MASH. And that's where I first met Elliot Gould, Donald Sutherland. And Donald Sutherland had the weirdest affectation. He used to say A at the end of sentences. He would say, nice day, A. And I thought, God, that's weird. And then, years later, I'm working with Ivan Reitman. And he says, A. And I thought, that's so weird. That's just like Donald Sutherland. And it wasn't until I got close to Danny Aykroyd that it dawned on me. It's like, Canadians!
Well, you know how you spell Canada. C-A-N-A-D-A.
Well, you know what they call successful Canadians. Americans. Yeah. Anyway, what was I telling? Oh, so Doug and Chris and Harold are writing this thing. Now, Ivan Reitman had made a film in Canada called Cannibal Girls, which had the fear buzzer. When it got gory, the buzzer would go, you know. And I think he'd done some porno and stuff. But anyway, Ivan was, you know, going away in Canada. And he approached Maddie. He said, don't you think the National Lampoon should do a stage show? So Ivan produced this show called Lemmings. Now, if you look at Lemmings, Lemmings had John Belushi, Christopher Guest, Chevy Chase, Bill Murray. It's astonishing who was in that show. And mostly from Second City, but nonetheless, it's an incredible collection of talent. And then John Belushi became the director of the National Lampoon Radio Hour, which also did brilliant work. This is before Saturday Night Live. So then, I'm just telling you all this background because meanwhile I'm not involved in any of this. I'm out in LA making, doing other stuff. Then Ivan Reitman very successfully produced that show, and then he became Maddie's partner to produce the movie. They made a deal with Universal, with Ned Tannant at Universal Studios. There were two young executives, Tom Mount and Sean Daniel, who championed the project. The trouble was the script read very, at the time, I guess the word's outrageous, but strong. And I know for a fact, I think it's very funny. The studio sent the script to John Schlesinger, Mike Nichols, and I'm trying to think who else, another director, I think Richard Lester, but they literally threw it back. And
Dick
so,
Lester had done the Beatles movie.
Oh yeah, Dick Lester, great director.
I think that he'd be,
The script was pretty offensive. It was really funny, but it was really funny, but it was offensive. I mean, it was racist, and it was fairly anti-Semitic, and it was definitely misogynist. It was like the Lampoon, So this just sounds so weird. Okay, so I'm shooting Kentucky Fried Movie, it's an independent, non-union show. My script girl, the continuity person, was named Catherine Wooten Boots. Beautiful girl who went on to do Animal House and the Blues Brothers with me. She's retired. She's a beautiful girl. And Catherine had a boyfriend at the time named Sean Daniel, who was the assistant to Tom Mount, who was the second guy to Ned Tannant at Universal. And she would come home and say, well, we blew up a car and had a midget in a clown suit, whipping naked girls, and, black muscle men and karate killers, and, she'd try to explain what we did that day. And because Kentucky Fried was shot in 20 days very quickly. And anyway, so Sean came and saw the movie, and he's the one who recommended me to Tom and to Ned, why don't we get John Landis to supervise a rewrite of the script? So that's what I was hired to do. So I flew to New York, and I met the three guys who looked at me like, you're from California, that New York bullshit. And I met with them, and anyway, they were all incredibly talented, and I worked with them, and we rewrote the script. I mean, my major contribution in that stage was just making it clear who the good guys and bad guys were. I mean, the original script, everybody was a pig, essentially. Now there were clear villains, and Doug Kenny, I really think, is the really brilliant one. I mean, they're all. I mean, Harold Ramis has become an incredibly successful director and actor and writer, and Chris Miller. I mean, they're all gifted guys. But I really think Doug is like Caddyshack. It's Doug's brain. Anyway, so when the studio then said, "Well, John, why don't you direct it?" I think Ivan was upset because I think he wanted to direct it, and I was very taken aback. And the most astonishing thing is that's before Kentucky Fried came out. Kentucky Fried came out and made a fortune, but that's not how I got Animal House. I look back on that and I think, that wouldn't happen now. It's totally different now. That would not happen now. And Animal House was a very low budget picture. It was $2.3 million or $2.2 million, which at the time was the cheapest by $5 million of any movie they were making. And we shot it in Eugene, Oregon, had total independence.
Now I heard that the film, tell me about sort of getting that Oregon, was it University of Oregon?
What happened was we sent the script out to it's supposed to take place in a northeastern college, and we sent the script to every major school in the country who rejected it out of hand, I mean, they thought, what, not on our campus, It's like, Claude Rains in Casablanca. I'm shocked. It was like, and so we were really in trouble. And I scouted Georgia. I mean, I scouted all over the place. And I remember Governor Jimmy Carter gave me his jet to fly around to scout because they wanted business down there. Smokey and the Bandit went there. Anyway, so the University of Oregon in Eugene has a great look to it. And because it's, it's Ivy League, it's red brick and because it's Oregon, it's cloudy all the time. In fact, we shot 30 days in Oregon, 30 days of rain, every goddamn day. And it's a funny, do you know that story of how we got into the school?
Tell me about it. I want you to tell me.
the dean of the school was named William Boyd, like Hopalong Cassidy, but not. And he let us come. He not only let us come, he gave us free reign of the campus. We shot everywhere. We built sets in the gym. The dean's office in the movie is the dean's office. We brought a horse in there, and I remember that this professor peeks in. What's going on? He peeks in, and there's this horse in the office. And he looks like this. And I forgot who, I think that Cliff Coleman, but someone said to him, "You ever seen a horse in that office before?" And this guy said, "The rear end of a horse many times." I just remember like, oh. Anyway, the reason he let us shoot there is a great reason, because he was sent a script called The Graduate to shoot at his school. He read it and he thought, no, this can't happen, sleeping with the mother. And no. And then he saw The Graduate. It was a big hit, and it's a great film, and he thought, he doesn't know how to read a script. So when he got Animal House, he read it, and he said, I don't know, I'm sure, So because he turned down The Graduate, we were able to shoot there. And it was an excellent location, and we shot there. And then we shot 30 days in Oregon and 2 days in L.A., actually not even, a half a day on a stage to shoot Tommy Hulse's The Angel and the Devil on blue screen, and then one night on the back lot to shoot John climbing up that ladder. Everything else was in Oregon.
Amazing.
That's all we've got time for today. Next time, John Landis talks more Animal House, why he did want John Belushi, but didn't want Chevy Chase. Plus, what it was like lunching with Hitchcock, an American Werewolf in London, and working with Michael Jackson to create the legendary Thriller. See you then, and don't forget to subscribe while you're at it. Ouch! Ooh.